Yes, so the daf we're learning today will be in 29, Tractate Eruvin, chapter 3. Tractate Eruvin is the name of the chapter, but we'll start from 28b3. Amar Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda. You see it? Amar Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda in the left column in the bottom.
Yeah.
So previously there was a question between Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel about the bracha of a palm hearts, or hearts of palm. Rabbi Yehuda said Adam, and Shmuel said Shahakol. Rabbi Yehuda said Adam because it is food. Shmuel Shahakol because eventually it become hardened. Its end is to harden and become unedible. So we don't say a bracha who creates fruit of the ground. Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, Shinino kavosich mustabo. Incisive one. The logic of the law accords with you. Usually it means sharp one. Here they write incisive. That's not should say for the actions what it says snow and radishes eventually out of palm.
Yeah, but two different opinions.
According to the Tractate Eruvin and according to the Orthodox Union Adama. After eating from Bashir.
Well, we're having the same machlokas here.
Yeah.
It's not the same because over here it's Adama and Eitz, over there it's Eitz and Shaka.
Oh, yeah, different.
So the Gemara says that's snow and sefer akshus. What about radishes? Also, they are hardening in the end. Also harden in the end. If left in the ground, and the bracha is the Gemara says this is not so because of a basic difference between palm hearts and radishes. The people plant radishes with the intent to eat the tuber while it is still soft, and it is this intent that renders them a fruit. Therefore, radishes are subject to specific blessing as long as they're edible. As long as they're edible, you'll say Bar Adama. Dikla loina tein shadai to the kairo. Comes to dikla, comes to the plant. When it comes to the hearts of palm, people do not plant palm trees with the intention of eating the palm hearts. On the contrary, their intent is to preserve the trees. Palm hearts are not subject to these blessings, and the general blessing is therefore made shakra.
No, you said not shakra. You said Eitz or Adama here.
No, that's the opinion of Shmuel, of Rabbi Yehuda.
Yeah.
Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel says, Shmuel tell him you are smart. And mistabo kavosich mistabo. He says the logic of the law accords with you.
Mm-hmm.
So then the Gemara says, 1 second. Veloi, what about snoin? So the Gemara says, no, when it comes to radishes, different. Because people planted to eat. When it comes to palm trees, people don't plant palm trees for their hearts of palm.
Right. So
therefore, it still makes sense what Rabbi Yehuda said, that it should say shakol. Now the Gemara concludes, even though Shmuel himself praised Rabbi Yehuda, Aloha kavasi Shmuel, so the Aloha accords with Shmuel that you should say Adam. So I don't know how the Tractate got to the opinion of Eitz. It seems like over here Halacha like Shmuel, you say Bo Adama. Actually, it's Shmuel said Shackle.
Yeah, shackle or dama. I couldn't.
Rabbi Yehuda,
You have to say it's for me. It's out because when we.
but that was the opinion of Starkey. That's what you showed me.
Yeah, but they have two opinions. But it's
Right.
it's when you have the fruits, and a hard tongue is not the fruits. You eat the trunk,
Right.
so it's adama. In my opinion, I don't know. It's not an apple. It's not a.
It says in the time of Mashiach that we're able to eat the trunk itself, right? So what would people say on the on the trunk? Adama, it actually makes sense to say Eitz on the trunk.
Oh yeah.
It's Eitz. It's not.
It's all trees.
It's a tree. So what difference does it make if I eat? What do you say if you eat the leaves of a tree? It's also a question, right? Maybe some trees, the leaves are edible.
Why banana is adama?
There's a tree called sour apple. The Cuban people, I think, eat the leaves. They chew on the leaves. They make a drink from the leaves.
So why banana is adama?
Like a tea.
Banana.
No, that's not a tree. That's a bush. But it's not a real tree. Some say on papaya also that it's
Also,
not.
yeah.
It's not a tree, but a real tree, like an orange tree, an apple tree. So it's not so it's not so simple that it's not ha'etz and it's not ha'adama, but it seems like the Gemara tells us it should be like Shmuel. So that was the second opinion there, Shackle. So although Shmuel praised Rav Yehuda, meaning he kind of almost, so to speak, agreed with Rav Yehuda, but eventually the Gemara says that still halacha like Shmuel, they say Shackle. What was the reasoning of Shmuel?
People plant radishes with the intent to eat the tuber.
No.
Do not plant palm trees with the intent of eating the palm hearts.
That was the reason.
So it's a secondary thing, but the ikr of the radishes, you're planting for the radish. Here, the palm trees for the palm trees and the
Right. So the Gemara says, Gufa Amar Yehuda Amar Rav Kshus v'Choz Me'ovim B'hem. Hops and green grain may be used for an eruv. V'ochem alei b'pe'adama, and the blessing for them is b'pe'adam. Kshus b'chama, how much hops constitutes the equivalent of 2 meals, the amount required for an eruv. Rabbi Chil said below, in another context, a handful. Here too, a handful of hops sufficient. How much green grain constitutes the equivalent of 2 meals? The equivalent of a full bundle of farm laborers who bundled the green grain uniformly. So even if you are using it for eruv, there's a certain amount that has to be taken. So if it's hops, it's one amount, and if it's chozes, it's one amount. Hops would be kemloi hayod, which is the handful, and green grain should be a full bundle of farm laborers. Okay. Amar Chilki Abatu Ma'ovim v'Kalyo. Chilki Abatu said we make an eruv using kalyo, which is hard stalk of certain plant. A hard stalk of a certain plant. The kalyo sakadat, the Gemara says, does it enter your mind? These stalks are hard as wood and are certainly unfit for use in an eruv. Why? Because they're not edible. Ella, the Gemara has to say biyakol the kalyo, rather with the green of kalyo plant. Chama and how much must be used? Ama v'chil kimloi hayod. The v'chil said a handful of kalyo is sufficient for 2 meals. Rabbi Menashe Amitay went out to the villages to inspect his crops. So they asked him a question. The villager asked him, what is the law of making an eruv with moist beans? That's what should we do? Can we use moist beans for an eruv? So Rabbi Menashe did not know. So when he came to the study hall and asked other scholars their opinion, they told them, Rabbi Menashe said, we may make an eruv with moist beans. So Yechiel said a handful is sufficient. Said we may make an eruv with raw beets. Now raw beets is not edible, very hard to eat. They have to be cooked for a while.
I don't even like it right.
The Gemara says, "Ain, is this so? How's it possible?" He says like this: raw beets can kill a healthy man. If raw beets are dangerous to eat, how could Rabbi Menashe permit them to be used in an eruv? Which is like it says it's almost rhymes. It says raw beets can kill a live man. So chay and chaya. So he said the chayo means raw. Gavur chayo also means alive. So he played on words. He said if you eat raw beets, it can kill a live man. A healthy man. So now we're starting 29, page 29. The beet that of which of Chisda spoke was partially cooked. So remember they spoke about the thief, the famous thief.
Yeah.
And he would cook things halfway. Ravuna said we may not make an eruv with raw beets. As we just said before, that raw beets kill a healthy man.
The name of this thief? The side.
Yeah, that's right.
Bendosai. Yeah. Anyhow, the Gemara said 1 second, but we saw people that eat raw beets and they don't die. The Gemara answers also there the statement of Rabbi Menashe which prohibits the use of raw beets because they are unhealthy refers to partially cooked beets. Statement of Rabbi Menashe which prohibits the use of raw beets because they are unhealthy refers to partially cooked beets. But completely raw or completely cooked may be used for an eruv since they are not unhealthy. That's the interpretation of it. So halfway is really worse than raw. A dish of cooked beets is healthy for the heart and good for the eyes. And certainly is good for the stomach. Abai said this is so only if the pot set on the stove until the beets became completely soft from the boiling, which made a tuk sound, that it's really done, that it's ready. I guess there was no water left in the pot. So good for the heart, good for the eyes, good for the intestines. Rava said, I'm ready to answer any question like Ben Azai, who fielded questions with great clarity and sharpness of mind in the markets of Tveria. One of the rabbis said to Rava, you said you like Ben Azai, right? You can answer any question. So they asked him a question. If an Eru is made using apples, how many apples are needed? Okay. Do we make an Eru using apples? Question mark. Yeah. Can we make an Eru with tapuchim? The Gemara says, Veloy. And are apples not valid for use? What's the problem with apples? Didn't the Mishnah suggest everything is fine? Bakoil Marvin, it's even the name of the chapter. Bakoil Marvin, you can use everything for Eru. The Mishnah only excluded water and salt. The Mishnah taught all foods combined to disqualify a person from eating teruma if he eats an amount equal to half pras. How much is half pras? There's a debate. Some argue that it equals to 4 eggs, and others reckon it as 3 eggs. Okay, 4 or 3 eggs. 2 to 3.5 ounces. So he said, all foods combined to disqualify a person from eating teruma if he eats an amount equal to 2 half pras. And also combined to equal the amount of foods for 2 meals, which is the measure needed for an eruv. So you have to have 2 meals according to this. They also combine to equal the amount of foods for 2 meals, which is the measure needed for an eruv.
English. All foods combined to disqualify a person from eating truma if he eats this amount, half pras. So if he eats less than half pras, he doesn't get the truma. This is the English.
No, we're saying
if you eat half pras,
if you're not qualified to eat truma, let's say you're not a Kohen,
okay,
right? So eating a few different things of truma, right? If you eat,
so you have to eat like 4 eggs of truma
to be liable for punishment.
Okay.
Yeah. So we need 2 meals, which is the measure needed for an eruv. And if they are tameh, they combine to equal the size of an egg, which is the minimum amount of food that defiles with the tumah that foods confer upon others. So we have 3 measurements over here. All food, they combine to disqualify a person from eating teruma if he eats an amount equal to half pras. Mozain shtei sudas leil, we need 2 meals. In regards to teruma of foods, the size of an egg. By my tuvta, and how is it a refutation of Rava's statement that applies that apples may not be used for an eruv? Holding in the right column, 29a1. Why my tuvta? This Mishnah, how is it a refutation of Rava's statement that apples may not be used for an eruv? If you say that the Mishnah indicates that apples are acceptable because it taught that all foods combine to equal these measures. And these apples are edible foods, so they also would be included in the middle part of the Mishnah, which speaks of an Eruv. But this is not a proper inference, because Rabbi Yochanan said, we cannot infer from general statements, even where it says except chutz. Hence, it is possible that apples are an exception to the rule. Meaning, he wants to say that the klal of the Mishnah, bakoil ma'arvin, that you can use everything, is not per se bakoil, because there is chutz. The moment there is chutz out, except excluding, let's say, water and salt, so it could be that other things are excluded also, like apples. Ela mishum diktani, rather, Rava is refuted because the Mishnah taught the following two laws together. And also combined to equal the amount of food for 2 meals, which is the measure needed for an Eruv. And they combine to equal the size of an egg, which is the minimum amount of food that defiles with the tuma that foods confer upon others. And these apples are also capable of defiling with the tuma that foods confer upon others. Now, since apples are undoubtedly food, they are included in the verse of any food that is edible. Leviticus 11:34. The source of this type of tuma, hence, apples may be used exclusively or in combination for an Eruv. Rava's opinion is therefore refuted by the Mishnah.
So you can use that.
Yeah. Because he said, do we make an Eruv using apples? But here the Gemara says, here we go. You can use it. So what is the answer to the question? How many apples are needed? They didn't ask him if it's possible, and they asked him how many. So, Amarav Nachman tapuchim bekav. The minimum amount apples is a kav. It says over here that 1.5 to 2.6 quarts. That's a kav. What's uchla? Is 1/8 of a log. Measure of spices, liter of vegetables. 10 nuts, 5 speeches, 2 pomegranates, and 1 esrog. Roma Gusak Bardom Mishmei de Rabbi Menashe Bar Shuguvli Mishmei de Rav Lechen LaEruv. And so far for making of an Eruv, these measurements also apply, since they equal the amount required for 2 meals. And these apples should be like peaches, since both are fruits. If 5 peaches suffices for an Eruv, 5 apples should also be enough. Why then did Rav Nachman say kav? The Gemara says, Ani chashive, these peaches are a significant food in the meal. Since 5 peaches are the normal amount of one would eat over 2 meals, only that amount is needed for the Eruv. And these apples are not significant food. Hence, an amount of apples equivalent to 2 full meals, the larger kav measure must be used for an Eruv. So it goes also by the significance, by the chashivus, not just by the amount. I told him Rav's ruling in reference to the Mishnah, which specified the minimum size of various Meiser Oni gift, which Rav adopted as Eruv requirement as well. V'amor Abayis, and he erroneously related Rav's ruling in reference to Abayis when he taught it to Gur Sak Brei Dore. There's now an person only begeren. It was taught in the Mishnah, one may not give to the poor at the threshing floor less than mechatzi kav chitin kav sorim, half a kav of wheat or half a kav of barley. There's a minimum amount that you should give the poor. Mechatzi kav seirin, half a kav of barley. V'kav v'chetzi kusmin, v'kav gulgoros umonet vela. A kav and a half of spelt, and a kav of dried figs, or a mone of pressed figs. Rabbi Akiva omer pras. Rabbi Akiva says a peas. V'chatzi leg yain, half a log of wine. Rabbi Akiva omer revis. Akiva says a quarter log. Urevis shemen, and a quarter log of oil. Rabbi Akiva omer shminis. Rabbi Akiva says an eighth. And regarding all other foods, you have to give him enough that he can sell them and buy with the proceeds foods for 2 meals. And Rav said, and so far from making an Eruv, these measurements also apply 2 meals. And what is preferable about associating Rav's statement with this Mishnah rather than with the Baita? If you said Rabbi Yosef objected because it was taught in that Baisa about spices. And spices cannot be eaten. And spices cannot be eaten, so alone they would be unacceptable for use in an Eruv. Rabbi Yosef therefore reasoned that Rav was not referring to the Baisa, but here in the Mishnah, was it not taught wheat and barley, and they are also inedible in their natural state. Hence, Rabbi Yosef's objection cannot derive from the Baisa mention of spices. Rather, since the Mishnah teaches a half log is the amount of wine that should be given to a pauper. Rav said elsewhere, we may make an Eruv using 2 revi'is of wine. Since Rav requires so much wine, we can infer from it that when Rav said, and so for making an Eruv, Ahamas Nisin Komar, it was regarding this Mishnah, which fixes the minimum amount of wine for Meiser Oni also at 2 revi'is. That he said, Shmamina, infer from it that when Rav equated the measurements of Eruv to those of Meiser Oni, he did so regarding the Mishnah. Amarav Modesh Tesudus Le'eruv, and of food for 2 meals. The measure needed for an Eruv. Savaris L'meimar Yosef taught to say, Adi Kasudamai Sudamai, when there is an amount sufficient for 1 meal from this food, and 1 meal from this food, but that smaller amount of 3 or more foods may not be combined. Rabba said to him, even a half, a third, or a quarter of a meal may come from each of the foods. The only condition is that the combined total equals the amount of 2 meals. That's the main requirement. You have to remember that it has to be total 2 meals. Gufa, the text mentioned earlier, we may make an Eruv with 2 revi'is of wine. And we need that much wine for an Eruv. Shimon says, wine is the amount needed to eat. Soak bread in it for 2 meals. Vinegar, the amount needed to dip meat in it for 2 meals. Olives and onions, the amount needed to eat bread with them for 2 meals. The Baisa indicates that an amount of wine smaller than 2 revis is sufficient for an Eruv, contrary to Rav's opinion. Also, B'chamo Vashlo, there in the Baisa we are speaking of cooked wine, which is used as a dip. Therefore, a smaller amount is sufficient. Rav was discussing uncooked wine, which one normally drinks with a meal. He therefore required a half log, 1 revis for each of 2 meals. Omar Mar, Master said, quoting the aforementioned Baita, Chometz kedel tabel boy, vinegar, the amount needed to dip meat in it for 2 meals. Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav. Rav Gidel said that Rav said, kedel tabel b'mozen shte sudas shel enough to dip in it 2 meals worth of vegetables, when the meals consist entirely of vegetables. Others say that this law was taught differently. Enough vinegar to dip in it vegetables which are eaten as a side dish in 2 meals, in which other foods are served as well. Obviously, fewer vegetables are involved in the latter case. Hence, less vinegar is required according to the second opinion. Olives and onions, the amount needed to eat with them the bread of 2 meals. And with onions, may we make an eruv? Can we make an eruv with onions? So Bishum Belozo says, about Disco. One time, Rabbi Meir spent the Shabbos in a city called Disco. And a person came to him, a certain guy came, and he said to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi, I made an eruv with onions to allow me to travel from my hometown to Tivin. Our disco was located somewhere between this man's home and Tivin, but it was also beyond his original Shabbos boundary. Were it not for the eruv, he could not have traveled even thus far. So Meir set him down and told him to remain within his 4 amos. Since an eruv made with onions is not valid, this person had traveled beyond the Shabbos boundary and could travel no further. This episode demonstrated that onions are not acceptable for an eruv. Rabbi Meir told him, stay here. So this is how we answer the question to him. Moses like Kashyo, this incident involved an eruv made with the leaves of the onion plant, which are not good to eat. The eruv was therefore invalid. Rabbi Mois, this first baita which allowed onions, referred to an eruv made with the onion bulb itself. So that's the difference between be'olim and imois, leaves or the onions itself. The Tanya or chabot maize. If one ate onion and rose the next morning and died, we should not wonder from what did he die. He died from the onions. Don't eat onions and go to sleep. Shmuel said this taught only about the leaves of the onion. But regarding the onion bulb itself, we do not object if anyone eats it. So it seems like the leaves of the onions are more lethal than the onion itself. They are more potent. And about the leaves, we said that they are injurious to one's health only the La'avtzil Ziroso in 29b1. The Lo Yavtzil Ziroso when the leaves did not yet grow a zeres. The little finger. Aval Avtzil Ziroso Leislan Bo, but if the leaves grew a zeres, we do not object if anyone eats them. Rav Papa said it was said that eating onions is unhealthy only if one does not drink beer with them. Aval ishteshicha, listen, but if one drinks beer with them, we do not object if they're eaten.
Rabbi, I heard one guy that he makes dishes in Israel. He's a Brazilian guy, but he's a professional cooker. He told him if you leave an onion in the fridge during the night to eat tomorrow, it's very bad.
But the Gemara isn't.
Oh.
The Gemara said if it's peeled, it's not good to leave it in the.
If
You
cut
should
it-
not eat it.
Yeah.
If it's peeled.
If you cut up the onion, if you put it in the fridge, you're not gonna, if you cut it up.
But even if you put it
I want to tell you what the Gemara said. I want to tell you the Gemara said that if it's peeled onion, and also the Gemara says about garlic, but they sell you peeled garlic. You can buy peeled garlic.
it's not good.
Saying the Gemara said it's not good, but if they sell it and there's a shgacha on it, it probably, if the tips are there, the tip of it is still there, they probably found some kind of heter. But yeah, I saw it about onions. So the Gemara says, a person should not eat an onion because of the poison within. There's a poison in it. There was an incident involving Rabbi Chanina, who ate half an onion, and consequently he consumed half the poison in it. And he fell ill. He became sick and was close to death. And his colleagues implored Hashem to have mercy on him. And subsequently he recovered and lived because the Jewish people needed him at that time. Beer may be used for neu, and like drawn water, it invalidates a mikveh when 3 lugin fell into a mikveh before the mikveh has acquired 40 seah of natural water. Okay, so if you put beer in the mikveh before you have 40 seah, you don't have yet 40 seah, and you pour 3 lugin of beer, you disqualify the mikveh. Matkiv la Rav Kana Peshita. So Rav Kana said it's obvious. What's the difference between beer and colored water? Colored water invalidates a mikvah when 3 lugim fall. When 3 lugim fall in before the mikvah contains 40 seah of natural water. Certainly beer, which is also water-based, should invalidate the mikvah. Why was it necessary for Shmuel to propound this obvious ruling? They said that there, in the case of the Mishnah, the liquid is called colored water, and therefore retains the legal status of water, and drawn water invalidates a mikvah. Here, in the case of beer, which fell into a mikvah, it is called beer, and we might think that it no longer has the status of drawn water, and therefore does not invalidate a mikvah. Shmuel informs us otherwise, that beer is still considered water. And with how much beer do we make an eru? How much is sufficient for 2 meals? with 2/4 of a cup of beer. Kidisnan, as it was taught in the Mishnah, one who carries out wine is liable if he carried enough to mix a cup. And on this baisa, and on this the baisa taught V'tanya lo my kois yofe. What does it mean? Ample cup. What is kois yofe? Kois bracha, a cup used for a blessing. A cup of wine used for blessing must contain a quarter cup of pure wine. I think revis is between 2.8 ounces to 3.2 ounces. Different opinions. How much is revis? So over here it says, so that after you mix it with water, it will contain a quarter cup of diluted wine, which is pleasant to drink. This is the smallest measurement of wine upon which blessings are made. And we have calculated the standard dilution according to Rabbah. Rabbah said, any wine that is not diluted, al-chad tlas maya, 1 part wine with 3 parts water. Lav chamo, it's not wine anymore. If you put so much water in it, 1 part wine with 3 parts water is not good wine. Therefore, a quarter cup of diluted wine requires a 16 cup of quarter log of pure wine. Avacha now establishes that the Mishnah imposed liability for carrying a 16 of a cup or a quarter log of wine from one domain to another. From that measurement, he derives the amount for other beverages. And to be liable for carrying all other beverages, one must carry a quarter cup of them. And the measure for carrying waste water is set at a quarter cup. Meaning how much you have to carry to be liable. But also, since there in the Mishnah, which was taught, the measurement of carried liquids, a ratio of 1 to 4. 1 to 4 was established. Here too, in calculating the amount of beer required for an Eruv, Rav Acha Bar Yosef used the ratio of 1 to 4. And since Rav said previously that 2/4 of a log is the minimum amount of wine for an Eruv, for beer, 4 times that amount, or 2 login, is needed. And this is not correct, because the laws of carrying on the Shabbos and the laws of an Eruv are based on different considerations. There, the amount of beer for which one is liable is quadruple
4 times.
the measure for wine, because anything less than this is not significant. And one is liable only for carrying a significant object. But here regarding Eruv, inherent significance is not a relevant consideration. Because people will sometimes drink a cup of beer in the morning and a cup of beer in the evening, and rely on this to satiate themselves, since the quantity of food required for an Eruv depends upon people's eating habits. An amount of beer smaller than 2 lugin is sufficient. Tmorim b'chama, when using dates for an Eruv, how much must be used? Amar Yismon b'kav, with a kav of dates, the Eruv is valid. Amar Yismon minam minala, from where do I know to say this? So the Tanya Ochal Gergos Shinutmorim, for it was taught in a Braisa, if someone intentionally ate dried figs, there were Turuma, and repaid the Kohen whose figs he had eaten with dates. Tov alav bracha, may he be blessed. This is acceptable. Tov alav bracha. Eichidami, what is the Braisa's case like? If you say that one who ate the figs returned dates of an equivalent value, that he ate from Teruma a zuz worth of figs and reimbursed the Kohen a zuz worth of dates. What does that mean? Tov alav bracha. What extra benefits does he confer that the Brisa should say, may he be blessed? Bezuza ocha bezuza kamishalem. He ate a zuz worth and pays a zuz worth, as he is obligated to do. El alav lefi mida. Rather, isn't the Brisa referring to someone who repays by volume and not by value? That he ate from it a measure of dried figs of teruma, which are worth a zuz, and he paid him a similar measure of dates which are worth 4 zuz. And on this it was said, or it was taught, may he be blessed. Alma Tmorim Adife, we see that dates are superior to figs. Since it has proved, it follows that a cup of dates also acceptable. Amar la'abai lo'elam de'ocha mineh bezuzah kamsham bezuzah. Act of the Baita is that he ate from it a zuz worth of figs that were teruma, and pays a zuz worth of dates. Umay tavar bocha. What did the Baita mean? May he be blessed. It means that although he ate dried figs, something which customers do not leap after, they are in adequate supply. Nevertheless, he repays with dates something which customers do leap after. Therefore, while the monetary value of the repayment does not exceed the value of the loss, the Kohen nonetheless benefits by receiving the dates which are more difficult to obtain. Seemingly, the dates are more expensive than figs.
And more edible.
Yeah. Shesiso, a cooked meal made of toasted wheat with honey, may be used in an Eruv. Amar Rav Pinchas terei gushei. Rav Pinchas said 2 spoonfuls must be used. Kisone, roasted grain, may also be used. Amar Abai tribune de fumbedisa. Abai said to pumbedisian bune, a type of dry measure used in Babylonia. Amar Abai omoli aim. Abai said, mother told me, Hane kisoni malu libam v'ad machshavto. These roasted grains are good for the heart and soothe one worries.
Rabbi Menashe, צריך להניק לעבוד במזיג הזה. אני יודע איך.
You know how to do it?
אוקיי.
So she speaks about roasted grains.
It's like Wheaties or
I
something.
know, but it didn't say which one. There's probably many roasted grains.
Yeah, all right.
Are good for the heart and soothe one worries. Abai said, mother told me, I'm man de isle chulsha de liba, one who has a weak heart. Laisi bisro dat memino dicha should bring meat and bring the dung of cattle dropped during the month of Nisan. And if no dung of cattle is available, you should bring twigs of willow tree, burn them, the dung or the twigs, until he has made coals from them. Then roast the meat on these coals. We'll call them a dung heated. So first he turns the dung into coals, then he burns the meat with these coals. He roasts the meat with the coals. And after eating the meat, which is the right thigh of the ram, which is sheep, and after eating the meat, he should drink diluted wine, and this will help his condition. Okay. Liftan. Thank you. So we just learned that a mother came to Abaya and she told them that if you have a weak heart, you should take meat from the right thigh of a sheep, and you should take a dung of ox, right? An ox. Bring a dung of cattle, not necessarily of ox, of cattle. During the month of Nisan, you should turn the dung into coals, and you should roast the meat with this dung. And then you eat the meat, and after it you should drink diluted wine, and it will help your heart. That's what a mother told Abai. Anything that is eaten with bread, the introduction to liftan was foods which are eaten with bread to complete the meal. The Gemara discusses whether or not roasted meat is considered liftan, and how that question affects the amount of meat that must be placed in the Eruv. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, anything that is eaten with bread may be used for an Eruv. There is enough of it to eat with bread for 2 meals. Anything that is not eaten with bread may be used for an Eruv if there is enough to eat 2 entire meals from it. So regardless, it's 2 meals. It says anything that is eaten with bread, which is liftan, there is enough of it to eat with bread for 2 meals. And kol she'eino liftan kedalei, anything that is not eaten with bread may be used for an eruv if there is enough to eat 2 entire meals from it. Basar chai kedalei cholemenu. Raw meat, if it is to be used in an eruv, must be enough to eat 2 full meals from it. Basar tzli, regarding roasted meat, Rabbi said, tzli, either way, roasted meat. Rabbi said enough of it to eat with bread for 2 meals. Like Korban Pesach has to be roasted. Rabbi said enough to eat 2 meals from it. Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef dispute whether roasted meat is normally eaten with bread or without. If you eat steak, do you eat it with bread or without? Roasted meat. Without. So there's dispute. The Persians eat slices of roasted meat without bread, which indicates a normal way of eating it. Abai said to Rabbi Yosef, for and the Persians consider the majority of the world. What are you learning from them? They're just one part of the world. It's one country. So Abai offers a proof that the custom of one group of people does not determine the law of others. Ratnan, for it was told in a Baisa which sets the minimum size at which cloth is subject to the laws of ritual impurity, big da'anim la'anim, clothing of poor people who will use a piece of cloth even 3 finger width by 3 finger width, is subject to the laws of Tumah when in the possession of the poor people. Usually it would require a bigger, in order for a garment to be susceptible to Tumah, it needs to be a garment. What is a garment? Depends if you're rich or poor. For the rich, it's a bigger size considered garment. For the poor, a smaller piece of material would be considered a garment. So it says, big da'anim, la'anim, clothing of poor people who will use a piece of cloth, even 3 finger width by 3 finger width, is subject to the laws of Tumah when in the possession of poor people. Big da'ashirim la'ashirim, clothing of wealthy people will use a piece of cloth only when it is at least 3 tfachim by 3 tfachim, not 3 finger width, is subject to the laws of Tumah, even in the possession of wealthy people. Aval big da'anim la'ashirim loy, the clothing of wealthy people, possession of poor people, does not have to be 3 tfachim by 3 tfachim to become tameh. So what is the Gemara try to do? Baisa demonstrate that the law is determined for distinct groups, like the Persians, they eat meat without bread tomorrow.
So tomorrow is the same schedule as today.